right, friend, we are back. We are now moving into the 515. So this channel of rhythm really is the design of being in the flow. So again, we are in the logical circuitry, and that logical circuitry that runs from the 52-9 and formats all of the circuitry here. And the circuitry format is about concentration. Being able to concentrate, focus, keeping still mountain, all of that is built into how we are going to move into the future, because logic is always trying to better us to move into the future. And because of that betterment, we need to be in the flow. So this is the channel of rhythm. This is the design of being in the flow. So that absolutely all the patterns and all the solutions that we need to identify can come when we concentrate and are in the flow. And then we can be led into the future based off of the ability to have logical organization. So as we look at this and we look into the future, and we know that this is a visual movement, and we know that this is collective sharing, and there's an understanding here. And what you're going to get is this response. We are totally here to respond to our own natural flow. This is a magnetic channel because the 15, this is the magnetic monopole. This is really creating the vortex and the aura that we live in on this planet. So everything about existence is about understanding your form. The 15 is in the quarter of form. So understanding that the love of self, the love of humanity, the love of the universe, all comes down to the form and loving that form. So this is the heart of our BioLife process, and it is deeply magical. The sacral center generates life. This vital generating force cannot exist unless life is generated through pattern and rhythm. Our whole entire existence is this generated pattern, this generated rhythm. So it is a part of all forms, right down to the single cell. This energy is the bedrock of the logical process and the way in which life moves forward towards the future in patterns. The combination of the diversity of pattern and the spectrum of rhythm leads to the definition of this channel, creating the very flow of life. Once in their flow, and these people, they don't get moved easily. Unless, of course, the not-self mind is pulling them out. But when you're standing in your own flow, when you're being the flow, it's pretty hard for people to move you off that. Because this is a generated energy, being in the correct rhythm is simply a matter of responding naturally. You have to be asked, and you have to be ready to recognize that pattern and rhythm is a response to life itself. All life works out of response. I look at this and because we have 360 acres of land, and being able to walk in nature and be one with nature and watching how this all works out. So in the area that I am, for many years we got very, very little rain. And then the last few years has been really, really super wet. And it is so amazing to me to watch how seeds, there's plants on my property that I have never seen. For 12 years that we were here, and last year, last summer, and last spring, there were plants like crazy. They were literally waiting. They were literally waiting for the rains to come so that they could then present themselves. And I couldn't go out there and force it. All life works out of response. It responded to the rain. So the power of logic is enormous when called upon. We need to ask it. So the rains came and asked those seeds, can you grow? And those that could responded. So the genetic code itself is the pattern scientists have been mapping. The DNA strands traps light. This is the inner light, or the inner peace that is in the fifth gate. And, so many spiritual teachings always say, your inner light, let your inner light shine. So enlightenment happens deep in the cells. This isn't a surface level enlightenment. This is deeply entrenched in our own DNA. So someone who puts out the proper flow magnetically pulls others to it. And they come to something of value. Life is so many different patterns and rhythms. And the 15th gate is the love of humanity. And the 5th gate is the generated pattern. So once the pattern is secure, humanity can love one another. The moment patterns are broken, the love for one another breaks down as well. So, one of the examples Ra uses in the material that I am walking through is, take New York City. And the pattern and the flow there is, you get on the subway, you don't get too close to people, you don't bump into them, for the most part, you don't even make eye contact, those kind of things. Like it's a generated pattern, and that pattern makes people feel secure. And then all of a sudden, you have something radical take place. And that radicalism changes the pattern, and all of a sudden it's broken, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh no, maybe I won't take the subway anymore because that pattern was broken. And it takes a long time for people to get back into the rhythm of the pattern that once was. And can you ever go back? Most likely not. You can only go forward, because that's what the 15-5 is doing. However, it's about watching. As soon as a pattern is broken, all of a sudden we don't love each other anymore. But when the pattern's flowing and everything's natural and the rhythm is there, there's great love for each other. So the collective love of the 515 is a physical well-being we have together. So we need to organize humanity into flow. That's what the logical stream does, is organizes. So when aligned with your flow and rhythm, everything you do feels effortless and natural. You have the ability to hold to fixed patterns or routines that serve you. It is difficult for others to pull you out of your own flow. And you always have the ability to identify and embrace the diversity of patterns in those around you, from fixed to extreme. You have your own sense of timing and flow that is determined entirely by your personal inner rhythm. Your timing operates through a gut response. This is what will help lead you towards what is truly satisfying. You can subtly benefit those around you by bringing them into a correct rhythm and timing as well. So when we look at family dynamics, and again, this is just a brief, look at it so that you can see how the 515, and remember the penta, the energy moves from the 15 down to the 5, over to the 14, up to the 2, and then it disperses at the top. And on the other side, it moves from the 46 down to the 29, over to the 14, to the 2, and then it disperses. So the bedrock, the very foundation of our internal household, is this inner flow. And the bedrock and basis of the family moving out into the world is all about discovery. But we're over here, we've already discussed this on like the 46 and the 29. So that the family is this inner flow, and it's moving to this home life. So the inner flow creates the home life that can then, bring material success to the family. But without the inner flow and without this home life, it's quite difficult on the material plane. And then we have small business and small groups. So you have a small business, 9 people or less. So the inner workings of the group are reliability and culture. So the moment someone with the 515 steps into any group, the group gets pulled into a rhythm one by one. When you step into a functional penta, you get pulled into the rhythm of the penta that carries you along for the ride. The 15 is that reliability, and the 5 is the culture. So reliability in small business and small group sense, and inner flow in family dynamics, and then culture, or home life. So what is the culture of the office? So if you have this full channel, that's what you're bringing. That's what you're bringing to the group. So this reliability and culture can come from one person with the whole channel, or from 2 or more people having the 5 or the 15 in the functional penta. So there is a reliable culture. Pattern brings security to the group. It helps eliminate chaos. Everyone has their place, something to do, and is doing it. There is a pattern for everyone. There's no surprises, no confusion. This produces energy that brings reliable integration of the group, office, or business. Creates a sense of reliability, dependability, and culture identity within the group. This is how we do things around here. This is important for the future of any business. And we also see that in the home life, right? If taking a look at family dynamics, like this is the inner flow and this is home. This is how we do things inside the household. So the same thing goes for that energy when we move out into the small business world. So here we're going to now go into just the 5. So this fixed rhythm, this waiting. Waiting is everything that has to do with being a generator. And it has everything to do with life. We saw that. It's a part of every life pattern. Repetition. Focused. Rhythm is the miracle of what it is to be alive. Pay attention to your natural rhythm and then fix it. If you need a nap every day, make it a ritual. Fix that pattern. Concentration needs to have proper patterns to work through. So if there isn't a pattern, it's very difficult to concentrate if we're not locked into a pattern. If we're scattered, if we're all over the board, concentration is very difficult. So when the energy is right, anything is possible in the logical process. Waiting isn't stopping, it's an active state, just like being pregnant. You enjoy fixed rhythms and tempos. It is important to stay true to your own inner rhythms in order to stay vital, healthy, and always in your flow. You find great satisfaction in mundane rituals and routines. Being forced to deviate from your natural rhythms can be physically, mentally, and emotionally destabilizing for you. And again, this is about response. So responding to what rhythm is correct. And remember that the logical side isn't cyclical. The logical side concentrates and focuses. So if that particular rhythm that you've been responding to for a period of time, all of a sudden you're responding to another rhythm, let it just go with it. Go with the flow of it. That's important to understand that, maybe you might be able to eat bacon and eggs for the rest of your life for breakfast. However, maybe you turn 45 and you're like, all of a sudden I'm responding to toast with peanut butter. And that becomes your fixed routine. This isn't a mental thing. This is about watching where the physical body is taking you. So not following your natural rhythms can manifest as insecurity, unhealthy behaviors, or physical disorders. Simply follow your natural routines or rhythm without question and do not let others lure you away from them. So if the reaction based off of other people's opinions pulls you away from your bacon and eggs, that is, that's not correct. But if all of a sudden you wake up one day and the physical body moves you towards the bread and the peanut butter, let that happen and see what takes place. So what this does is this sets the pattern for life, the dynamics of home life, and this really is, clean homes, healthy kids. This is the home life. So whatever the expression of the culture within your home needs to be, you set that if you have this fifth gate. If it isn't there, if nobody in the family has it, the culture the culture isn't going to be fixed. The family might be striving to adopt a culture, and yet nothing ever sticks. So in the business world, this is the ability to establish inner life in the office through, like, say, dress code or timings of meetings. This is the way we do things around here. So individually, this is someone who enjoys fixed rhythms, routines, and tempos. In the group, the 5 creates the rhythms, rituals, and shared practices for the team. So maybe it's Monday morning meetings, casual Fridays, time to start and end work, how people address each other. It is a shared set of assumptions that defines appropriate behavior for various situations. The key to maintaining the focus of the group. You can see the culture in an organization by looking at it, the way people dress, how the office is set up, the space is allotted, the way people address each other and relate to each other, the way people speak, and the language they use, their daily rituals and patterns. This is all about this fifth gate. So when and how they start or end a day or meetings, creating the potential for the humming work environment where everything is buzzing along, because people want patterns. They don't want to show up at work at 8 and, we're not going to open till 11 today and you have to sit around for 3 hours. No, if we're opening the doors and 8 o'clock is start time, 8 o'clock is start time. They're, that culture of what, it's almost like expectations. Now I know expectations are a lot on the human experiential way, but here, this is the culture. This is what we expect. So if if you're hired in and you're brought into this group, here is the culture. This is what we expect. That you wear, whatever. Maybe it's a particular t-shirt. Everybody wears this t-shirt. Or maybe it's everybody a name tag. Things like that, right? So the 5, the gate of fixed rhythms and waiting, the fundamental attunement to natural rhythms, waiting as an active state of awareness. Now, we're talking about a state. Awareness comes from the splenic, the solar plex, and the ajna. This is the active state of being in that natural rhythm. So that when you attune to that natural rhythm, the active state that you're sitting in, even though waiting is a part of your process, it's awareness. So the right angle cross of consciousness, question why we are here and progressively awaken to your consciousness. The juxtaposition of habits, maintain reliable patterns for the betterment of you and the collective. Left angle cross of separation. Separating from others gives you space to find purpose. And it's interesting to see separation. Because here we are, we're creating the culture, And yet, we need to be able to have a little bit of space there so that we can be fully in tune with our own natural rhythm. So let's go right from the very bottom, this perseverance. If the captain must, he goes down with his ship. So the courage in the face of adversity, the power to maintain one's own rhythm, the premature and often disastrous urge to cut one's losses, weakness in maintaining one's rhythm when challenged. This is, hey, I need a nap every day. And that nap is going to be from 2 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And if the building burns down around me, whatever, I'm going down with the ship. That's my rhythm. But what most of the time happens is that an outside circumstance comes in, and then all of a sudden there's a weakness. Oh, I can't keep that rhythm because so-and-so expects blah, blah, blah. Like, remember, you're setting the home life. You're setting the culture. And it's about your perseverance to do so individually. The 2 is this inner peace, the ability to ignore the temptations to take premature action. The gift of maintaining composure through idealized tranquility and the power to be comfortable with one's own rhythm. So this inner peace experienced as stagnation, the drive for power that is constrained by the fixed rhythm. So inner peace is what is being projected outwards. So within these fixed rhythms, within that waiting, there's this projection field that, there's an inner peace to all of this. And when you persevere and you have this perseverance to hold steady on that fixed rhythm, inner peace can take place. There can be this inner calm. And then we get to the 3, and here we have compulsiveness. So the fear engendered by the sense of helplessness resulting in unnecessary stress and activity. Compulsiveness can be limited in its negative effect through flights of imagination. Though still stressful, they do not lead to action. A surrender to the limitations of the fixed rhythm through the empowerment of imagination. So, even though imagination is a deep part of the human experiential way from 41 to 30, imagination is also a part of the logical way. Imagining the future and then building out the theories to move us into the future. And what the 3 can possibly do is have this compulsiveness, instead of waiting for the fixed rhythm, to compulsively let the outside world dictate its inside world. So the moon cannot stand still, unable to surrender and at odds with one's own rhythm. And when we look at this compulsiveness, it's to really be able to understand that the people that have this are convinced that their rhythm is a mistake. So then they become compulsive. And they take on unnecessary stress and unnecessary activity. So again, not every single, exaltation is going to be beautiful either, right? Because compulsiveness can be limited in its negative effect through flights of imagination. Though still stressful, they do not lead to action. That's important. So the surrender to the limitations of fixed rhythm through the empowerment of imagination. So compulsiveness is built right in there. And the exaltation of this is to go, I can just, daydream a little bit. And be empowered by that. And not have to feel like I have to change my own fixed rhythm to the outside world. And then we move to the hunter. Waiting is a guarantee of survival. So the creative genius to transform the most passive experience into active achievement. the power to make the best of one's fixed rhythm. So the vanity of a personality so strong that unwilling to hide behind the blind threatens its very survival. So the drive to deny one's own rhythms with predictable costs. Now, when we talk about the vanity of the personality so strong that it's unwilling to hide behind a blind. So when you're hunting, you can create these, like they're kind of like camouflage little kind of shacks or whatever, and they call them blinds, so that the animals, don't see you in there. And even though the 4 is about externalizing, this is about waiting as a guarantee for survival. And again, isn't it interesting? Because the logical side says there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee of the future. But if you adhere to the correctness of who you are, it will guarantee your survival. And then the joy, waiting is an aspect of enlightenment. Again, when we talk about the 5th line, or the 5th gate, this is a part of the enlightenment process as well as the 54.4. So to remain calm as the ultimate aesthetic and thus recognize the inner meaning of being, the power to be calm and to find one's place in the flow. So joy dismissed as an illusion, waiting as a failure, disillusionment with recognizing one's place in the flow. So how can, to be enlightened, to have enlightenment? We talked about this, the 515. The DNA is literally, there's an inner light there. And in order for this enlightenment, it's about being in the joy of the fixed rhythm. And that is how enlightenment can happen for us. I talk a lot about the transiting program. I talk a lot about the global orchestrated directory. All of this stuff is taking place. And instead of pushing against it, we recognize it and allow it to work through us and gain the wisdom so that we can sit in the joy of our own enlightenment process. And then we get to the 6. So something that I want to throw in here is that every sixth line begins its life as a 3rd line. Remember that? From 0 to 30, there's a 3rd line process taking place. So here, the yielding started off as compulsiveness. So the wisdom that has been gained is tremendous. So now the 6th line knows that it needs to yield. Waiting is never free from pressure, physical or mental, and is often punctuated by unexpected. So do we have any idea what the program is going to throw at us? We have no idea. I can give you all the mechanics. It is how it is going to play out. I can give you the what all day long. So can, anybody else that's really fluent in human design. They can give you the what all day long. It is the how that we have absolutely no idea. It's always the unexpected. And when the rhythm can just yield to knowing the unexpected is there, then it doesn't have to be compulsive. Because it tried that. And it was tough on it. So now it is standing out and it's looking out into the future and it's going to yield to the natural flow. So the growth of awareness that comes with bending to the universal flow. Accepting that in one's fixed rhythm, despite the pressures, growth will be empowered and often through the unexpected. There is a lot, or there is not a planet in detriment here. So in each and every one of us, there is a way, given the power of the position, that we will yield to the inevitable. Like, there's a flow happening. We're clueless to what that is. But if we just let it happen, then we can become wise. So now let's go to the 15th gate. This 15th gate is the gate of extremes. Modesty. So the love of humanity. This is absolutely about loving the form. Okay? Even though the 46 is there, and it loves the form, it loves the body, we also have a touch of that over here because this is a love of humanity. And all the love gates kind of, they work, as one in the vessel of love. So you are the breath of love. And that breath is the form. So there is a love of humanity that serves a higher purpose. This is about tolerance at its highest level. Patterns established and humanity operating correctly, we can tolerate one another. Again, the example Ra uses. We can tolerate being stuffed in a subway car and transporting ourselves to work every day and back home every day, as long as there is this, unwritten rule that, you don't touch me, or you don't make eye contact with me, or you don't bump into me, right? Even in an elevator, we all have this, you go to the very back, you turn around, and everybody stares at the door. There's this unwritten rule that that's just what you do. So this is the love of humanity or not. So you have the capacity to accept and to find a place in society for the full spectrum of human behavior. Your magnetic presence attracts people to you because of your acceptance and acknowledgement of diversity. So the acceptance begins with loving the extremes of your own rhythms, such as sleeping 10 hours one night and 2 hours the next. You do not have fixed patterns. You are capable of accepting other people's extremes without judgment. And you have the potential to pull people into your rhythm or balance and integrate the rhythms of others into a cohesive, reliable group. You have the potential to influence how extremes are made modest and are balanced and integrated into the collective. So again, when we look at it in a business aspect, it is this reliability. This is the ability to, pull that group together. It's that vortexual energy that happens in this 15 that allows for that cohesion, that group to come together. Over on the other side, there was a coordination there. Over here, it is that reliability of here's the pattern. So, we are all here and we are all one. That's what that creates, this aura that goes around the group as a whole. So this creates a feeling of trust that they can count on each other within the group because people are reliable. And again, in the family, we have the inner flow. This magnetizes the family and is a pulling agent. It is like, this pull into the vortex of the family unit. And when it is not there, then reliability is difficult. Inner flow of the family is difficult. It becomes a bone of contention or a place where, everybody fights. So when we look at the gate of extremes and we walk through the lines, so the quality of behavior which expresses the proper balance between extremes. The right angle cross of love, you are the living demonstration of love, the tolerance of the extremes of humanity. So the juxtaposition of extremes, exploring the extremes of life's seasons, the behavior of the extremes and the phases. Providing solutions in the left angle cross of prevention to prevent others from making mistakes. So now when we walk through this whole thing, we start as a duty, the ability to confront any challenge without expectations. The harmonic relationships which give support for the fulfillment of any task. The capacity of the self to confront any challenge through extreme and harmonic relationships. The alienation engendered through exaggerated claims, the capacity of the self to alienate others through extremes. Now, when we look at this, and we understand that, number one, the first, second, and third lines are an introspection. And yet here we're talking about harmonic relationships. But we are also in the 15, and the 15 is collective. So a lot of the harmonic relationship that we're talking down here is that you have a duty to yourself to have a harmonic relationship with your own extreme pattern. And that's your duty. And then the 2 is influence. Well, now it's like, okay, I have this harmonic influence, or I have this harmonic relationship with my pattern. Now there's the presentation of it. So you can influence other people. So modesty and the right action result in enduring standards. The capacity of the self to totally accept its extreme nature as correct. So where the sun's actions are natural and the earth's are contrived, though given the power of this position, the same effect can be expected. Capacity to use the extreme nature of the self to influence others. And then we go to the ego inflation of the 15. So the risk that modesty, once recognized, will self-destruct. So where the otherwise negative contrived modesty is here reinforced by recognition and maintained as an effective strategy. So the extremeness of self as a strategy to control the flow. Now, isn't that, really interesting? That all of a sudden these beings that, are here to, the third line being is that anarchist, that, martyr. And because of that, they're actually almost willing to self-destruct. But here what happens is that it tries to control the flow. Excuse me. And it isn't about that. It's about just letting the flow happen through you and to accept, with modesty, the extremes. So the I told you so mentality, the capacity of the self to point out the extremes of others. Now we have the Wallflower, this modesty as a shield against exposure of inadequacy. So a genuine form that may or may not mask inadequacies. So the uncomfortableness of the self when it is out of its own flow. And ultimately, weak defense leading to exposure and humiliation, extremism that keeps the self out of the flow. So as an externalization, all of a sudden we have somebody who's just being a wallflower. Shielding against that exposure of inadequacy. And the inadequacy is that, they can't adhere to a fixed rhythm. They are here to be extreme and to move in that extremity. And then we have the sensitivity. So the ability to sense when otherwise balanced behavior must be adjusted to meet the requirements of changing environments. So the power to grow, the capacity of the self to grow through experiencing the extremes, and the tendency to overcompensate, the drive of the self to overcompensate and disrupt the flow or disturb the flow. The whole thing about this is that when we look at the fifth line is this faith in the fifth gate. And now there's this sensitivity here. And it really is about being sensitive to all of these changing environments. the example Ra uses is here we take all of these men, we enlist them into the army, we put them into, or the military, or whatever languaging or group you want to put them into, and we make them be, in this extreme behavior and this extreme rhythm. Then we pull them out of that and expect them to be able to adapt to a totally different flow with no support. So there is no sensitivity to that. And yet, we have to have the ability to sense when otherwise balanced behavior must be adjusted to meet the requirements of changing environments. And that's what extremes can do. The flow that can happen is this beautiful flow, because what takes place in the logical circuitry is there is a lot about the external environment there. Because the external environment, okay, well, these are the patterns of the external environment. How do we move it into the future? So it really is this power to grow. And we talk a lot about the self here because that's the identity and direction. Now we have the 6th line. And the 6th line is this self-defense. Well, for the first 30 years, it lived in this ego inflation where it was ready to self-destruct. And now it's in this self-defense mode, basically defending its extremes. So the modesty that is never confused with weakness. Constant re-examination to weed out the weakest aspect. The power of the self in exploring the extremes to find the weakest point. A tendency to use harmony as a weapon in problem situations rather than focusing on the root causes. The power of the self to ignore the weakest point in favor of harmony. So the whole point of this is that it really is the duty of those that have this 15th gate to live in your extremes. And through living through those extremes, you allow the planet to either have a tolerance or not as to those extremes. All right, friends, we will move on to the next video.